started. So we're starting UTC 2, which is primarily about counseling, and as Beatrice mentioned last time, there's a lot of content here, so we're going to just get right into it. I know some people had heard that we were going to use a learning management system for UTC 2, and I just couldn't get it built fast enough because I just didn't get built fast enough. So we're planning on trying to do that for UTC 3. Hopefully I can get it built that fast. It will be before we're done. So we will move all the content and the materials into a learning management system sometime in the next few weeks. Moses, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to you.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, you're welcome to another session of our training this time. Thank you very much for participating and for being very active participants. We thank you all for this time, and we are now beginning course 2. It's a very interesting course. I recall that we are through with course 1. In course 1, we had physiology and pharmacology, and we went through the global problem, definition of terms, diagnostic manuals, addiction as a brain disease, brain communication, substance of abuse, and then we talked about stigma. But today, we are going to talk about treatment for substance use disorders, the continuum of care for addiction professionals. Our housekeeping or ground rules still, subsist at this time. You are free to ask questions, through your chat box, and we're also free to make mistakes because it's a learning process and an interactive one for that matter. We're supposed to collaborate and have fun if you can. Though we don't have enough time for that, but you can also switch off your phones at this time if they are on, or put them on silent mode. Remember that you have to take a pre-test before you come on this training session. And the group exercises, as usual, will not take place in this forum because of the medium we're using, but we do the exercises, as individuals, and then in the end we can have, our evaluation of the course. And also remember to write down or jot down any interesting things or whatever you want to do later on your journals. And also don't forget to make reference to the tab 21 that Morekwe introduced us to in the beginning of this program, where we know the skills and the competencies that are expected of us as addiction professionals. And as I said, this is a multidisciplinary, training. For some of us, it's very basic, and some of us are very knowledgeable. We thank you for all your contributions. In the emails, where people ask, several questions, Dr. Professor Tafera was very active, in sharing his own experience, and some other people. We thank you for the active participation and giving us, contribution from your own wealth of experience. Is making our experience also, the learning process, richer for us. So now we are going to the training goals. The course 1, the module 1 here is mainly introduction, which I have just done, but we go to the training goal for the whole of course 2. And the goals are as follows: to provide participants with an understanding of recovery and recovery management, and to provide participants with a comprehensive overview of the nature of change, and to provide participants with an understanding of the process and elements of treatment for substance use disorder professionals. So for substance use disorders. So these are the main goals for the whole of course 2. And then we have the learning objectives for the course 2 as follows. And we are expected to be able to answer these questions that will arise from these objectives at the end of this training. And one is to define and describe what recovery is all about, and define and describe elements of recovery management. Identify the 6 stages of change and describe at least one characteristic of clients in each stage. And also to briefly describe the principles of effective treatment. And then identify at least 5 factors that can affect a person's success in treatment. The other objectives are define and provide examples of recovery capital. Describe the components of treatment and define and provide examples of the continuum of care. And also briefly describe 5 evidence-based treatment interventions. So we are going to learn some terminologies here, just like we did in course 1, as we get along. It's really very interesting course. So at this moment, I want you to write 2 training expectations on your journal at this time. Not if it were the face-to-face training, then we would have provided you with an index card. But since we're using an online medium, you use a journal and write 2 training expectations, about this course. And as I said, the course has to do with treatment for substance use disorders, the continuum of care for addiction professionals. So what are your expectations? Just write 2, and Kim will help me read some of them so that we know whether we're able to meet them in this course or subsequent courses.
Okay, so far nothing.
So I give you maybe a minute or 2 minutes to write your expectations, what you expect, from this course, so that we will be guided on how we go about this presentation. Thank you. If you have any came from the chat box, I read them out. You have 1.5 minutes.
Here we go. How to provide support for client during recovery and how to achieve a successful treatment of a client with substance use disorder.
It's okay. We'll attempt to do that in this course. That's great. Any other?
Yep, now they're coming. To understand the evidence-based process of substance use disorder treatment, the recovery journey for our clients.
Okay, that's great. Hopefully we'll be able to meet that expectation.
A couple more interventions to support clients with co-occurring disorders of mental illness and substance use disorders. To be able to administer substance use disorder therapies.
Okay, so of them will come in subsequent, like module 3, we'll be able to take co-occurring disorders.
And one more, the role of family members in clients' recovery.
Okay, that is the realm of recovery capital. So thank you very much. I'm sure by the end of this module or course 2, we'll be able to answer most of the questions that you raised. So let's move on. We have a small exercise here. It's supposed to be a group exercise, but as I said earlier, will not be able to do it in groups, but we do it as individuals, writing on our journals and present. We are to prepare a brief presentation that defines recovery. This time around, it's not going to be a presentation as such, but I want you all individually to attempt to define what recovery is all about. I know that a lot of you are very experienced people and you'll be working in the treatment prevention programs, and you have your own concept or idea or your own definition of what recovery is all about. So we want to hear from you so that we can share what we think or what we believe recovery in the field of substance use disorder is all about. From your own experience, or what's your own working definition of what recovery is in your own practice. So I give you 2 minutes to do that. So let's attempt to write our own individual definitions of what recovery is all about. As I said, the course is a multidisciplinary course, and some of us are physicians, some psychiatrists, some psychologists, social workers, occupational therapists, and so on and so forth. So we have our own definition or idea of what recovery, means to us. So let's share with the group.
Okay, we're getting some answers. Recovery is restoration of former self, including relationships and functioning.
Okay, thank you very much. Relationship and functioning, that's great. Any other definitions?
Yes, getting better, no longer using the substance or having a reduction in the use or frequency of use.
Oh, that's a good one. Reduction in the frequency of use, or no longer, or maybe abstinence. Great.
Nothing else. Yeah. Oh, here's another one.
You still have 30 seconds.
Yeah, a couple more now. Now they're coming quickly. Okay. Cessation of use of unprescribed psychoactive substances. I'm going to read them quick. Recovery is claiming back what is lost due to substance use. Recovery is stopping using psychoactive substances and what you need to be sober. That's it.
Okay. I can see that the theme of abstinence runs through almost all, stopping the use of substance and not using drugs or prescription drugs that are not prescribed. Okay, thank you very much for such definition, because we need to have a consensus about what recovery is all about, since we are working together, for the benefit of the client or our clients. So let's go ahead. Training goals for course 2, specific training goals for course 2. Sorry. We are going to.
Yeah, I think we go to the next one.
Yes. So we are going to go to module 2 now.
Oh, there you go. You got them.
So are you there?
Yes, so this says Module 2, Recovery and Recovery Management. We're on it.
Okay. So you can all see the slide?
Yes.
Okay. So this is Module 2. Module 1 was basically an introduction to course 2. So we are going now to do look at what recovery and recovery management is all about in this module. And the learning objectives for Module 2 are, as follows. We define a recovery and then define abstinence in the context of recovery. We've done a bit of assignment whereby we all, made attempts at our own definitions of what recovery is all about. And then we're going to list and briefly describe at least 6 guiding principles of recovery and define recovery management and define recovery-oriented systems of care. So here is a consensus here, a consensus definition. This was this consensus definition was from the SAMHSA, that's the US Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration in 2005. They convened a panel of experts in the field of recovery and treatment and recovery, to come up with a consensus definition of what recovery is all about. As we said earlier on, we are working, as a multidisciplinary team, and we need to have a common or a consensus definition so that we can all work together, towards achieving the same end. And that is the recovery of the patient. But we need to be able to define what recovery is all about. So this was the consensus, and you can see the source from beneath the slide. It says recovery from alcohol and drug problems is a process of change through which an individual achieves abstinence and improved health, wellness, and quality of life. It's a process of change. It's not just a state, but it's something that is continuum, and it continues throughout the life of the individual or the client. So it's a process of change, and then which an individual achieves abstinence and improve health, wellness, and quality of life. So take note of the abstinence there, and also the process of change, then health, wellness, and quality of life. Recovery, a process of change, a continuous growth and improved functioning, and recovery management over a lifetime. So it means there's no beginning and stopping. Once an individual, is diagnosed with addiction or comes up with problem of addiction, then the treatment that is instituted is meant to last throughout the last part of the client, so to speak, because you treat and the person recovers and then is abstinent, but you don't just stop there. You continue to ensure that the individual works hard to remain abstinent and functional. So it's a process, and it's a continuous growth and management of the addiction process throughout the lifespan of the individual. So this is a consensus from the experts in the field of substance use disorder treatment and recovery. So abstinence in the context of recovery, not using alcohol or any non-prescribed psychoactive drugs, and not misusing any prescribed psychoactive drugs. So when we say the client is abstinent, what do we mean? It means he's not using alcohol or any other non-prescribed psychoactive drugs. and is not also misusing any prescribed psychoactive drug. Because sometimes, from our own experience as clinicians, you prescribe a drug, but the clients may not take it, as prescribed. Sometimes they extend, using the medicine beyond the period which the medicine was prescribed or the drug was prescribed, and sometimes they take an underdose or even an overdose. So not misusing any prescribed psychoactive drugs. And sometimes they want to take you for similar ailments even when the drug is not prescribed for them. So let's continue. We're still talking about abstinence in the context of recovery. Using the term non-prescribed allows for use of psychoactive medications to treat substance use disorders, mental disorders, or medical conditions such as severe pain when necessary. So some clients have medical conditions, for instance, those who suffer from sickle cell anemia. Sometimes they have bone pain crisis, and they will need the use of psychoactive substances, to treat the painful condition, and we shouldn't deny them. But if they don't need it, they shouldn't continue using it. And then so many other conditions, it may be surgical conditions or even cases of accident, or even people who have terminal illnesses suffering from all sorts of malignancies. They might need psychoactive substances, and some might be suffering from just other medical conditions that do not involve the use of addictive substances. We shouldn't deprive them, the benefit of such psychoactive substances, but they need to be taken under, control, the control of the physician prescribing the medicine. That's why I say using the term non-prescribed allows for use of psychoactive medications to treat substance use disorder, and some are even on substitution therapy on mental drugs. For instance, some who are dependent on opioids might be on methadone. So what about nicotine and caffeine? These are substances that are licit in almost every country of the world, and they're also psychoactive substances. So if a client is abstinent but takes caffeine or nicotine, do we say he is not in recovery or hasn't recovered? I want to get your own responses. What do you think? Because there are, for instance, in my own practice, sometimes you have patients who take multiple substances, including alcohol. Sometimes they even take opioids, and then they also smoke cigarettes. Now, when they are in treatment, they will tell you, "I've come thus far. I can give up alcohol or even opioid, but for cigarette, I don't think I can give it up." So, will you say the patient is not in recovery, or he's still in recovery in spite of the fact that he's still using nicotine? So I want to hear responses, get your responses.
So let's see, there's a couple already.
Okay.
One is, it depends on what he was primarily treated for. The next one is, the person has not recovered as they may alter the mood, behavior, thought, and behavior of the patient.
Great. Any others, please?
One more, nicotine is a high potent substance to make people, and it makes people develop dependence.
Okay.
One more, treatment needs to be specific and assessment of recovery will derive from the baseline. And then you finally
Okay.
you have that the person, you have a couple that say the person is in recovery.
Okay.
You have answers?
Yeah.
No?
Pardon? Okay. Okay. Thank you for your responses. Caffeine is taken by many people, and even those who are not addicted, take caffeine, because it doesn't have a lot of social or even physical consequences of on the user. So people don't see it as a problem, even when they abstain from other psychoactive substances and they take caffeine. People still consider them, as being in recovery, because it's something that is acceptable culturally and in many parts of the world, and people use it as a recreational drink, and it doesn't really have too many effects like the other psychoactive substances. But for nicotine, yes, some people believe that the client is not in recovery because some people see nicotine as a gateway drug to some other non-psychoactive substances. So they believe in total abstinence from every psychoactive substance. But generally, it's believed that, or the consensus, I would say, is that if people are able to abstain from other substances and they see smoke, like cigarette, it's part of the adverse physical consequences that they may come down with. The person is still considered as one who is not in recovery. Wellness. The definition includes wellness. So, but what is wellness? Wellness is the optimal state of health of individuals and groups. But there are two focal concerns here. The realization of the fullest potential of an individual, physically, psychologically, socially, spiritually, and economically. And the fulfillment of one's role expectations in the family, community, place of worship, workplace, and other settings. So you can see the dimensions here. It involves so many other components, dimensions. Physical dimension, and they also look at the psychological dimension, social dimension, and the spiritual dimension, and also economically. And the person must be able to fulfill his or her role expectations in the family, community, place of worship, workplace, and other settings. That is by WHO 2006. So we see it's really comprehensive if you look at it. Really comprehensive. Let's move on. Recovery from both mental and substance use disorders. 2011 definition. This is another consensus definition. Recovery from mental disorders and or substance use disorders is a process of change through which individuals improve their health and wellness, live a self-directed life, and strive to reach their full potential. This definition, came about as a result of a panel of experts in substance use disorders and also in mental health coming together to define what recovery is all about. And as someone wrote in his own expectation, looking at comorbid or co-occurring disorders. So some can have both mental illness and also addiction problem. So if you have a client who has a co-occurring disorder, what would be your own definition of wellness and or recovery? And when you have different professionals working together to achieve recovery. So what would be agreeable to all the professionals working together in terms of recovery? So they came about this definition. From mental disorders and or substance disorders is a process of change through which individuals improve their health and wellness, live a self-directed life, and strive to reach their full potential. Can anyone tell us what is common, to both the definitions of recovery? Earlier on we had one from substance use professionals, those who do treatment and prevention. they gave us a definition. This one is from sometimes other professionals and also those experts in the field of mental health. So what is the similarity here? I want to get responses from the participants. I'll give you 2 minutes. Yes, please.
Sorry, wellness, process of change.
Okay. I want similarity in the two definitions.
Another wellness and another process of change.
Okay, wellness, process of change. Any other?
Continuum of care.
Continuum of care.
Yep.
Well, yes. Well, it suggests that. Any other?
No, I mean, there's other people that said the same thing, but all process of change.
Okay. Are there any dissimilarities here? Is there anything in this definition that is not in the previous one? Where the two definitions differ?
I think I'm still getting where they're the same. Give it a minute.
Okay. Are there differences in the definition? So we can see that in these definitions, yeah, it's a process.
Okay, we are getting them now. Self-directed life, strive to reach full potential,
Yeah, the previous one also talked about, achieving the potential in various dimensions. So this one is also talking about reach their own full potential, but it didn't enumerate what aspect or dimension. Yes, please.
Also, seems that abstinence is not in the later one.
Okay. Abstinence. Thank you. So we see that abstinence is actually necessary for recovery, but it's not a must that the client must be completely abstinent before we say he's in recovery. Sometimes people can cut down drastically, and also maybe once a while they have a sleep, and and it's not a full relapse. We cannot say they're not in recovery, because the process of recovery can be bumpy. Fall, rise, have a sleep, and get up again and continue. So we cannot say that a complete abstinence is necessary for an individual to achieve recovery. No, it doesn't necessarily follow. So thank you for your great responses. Truly, there are many things that are similar here, as you actually highlighted. So we have this consensus definition. So when we now talk about recovery, what we're talking about, that a client comes and we treat him. He might even come as an inpatient and is treated. But when he's discharged, is that the end of it? No, it's a process. So how do we take care of him? When we detoxify him, when they are doing a lot of psychosocial workup, and then we're at the point of discharge, what do we do? And how does he continue to achieve abstinence or continue with the process of recovery? So it's a continuum. Now there are assignments that we're supposed to do as groups, but we might not be able to do them. But I want us to look at the various dimensions which were mentioned earlier. You look at what does it mean to achieve full potential in the area of physical health, and then some people also think about it. What does it mean to achieve it in the area of social health, or social responsibility to society? What does it mean to achieve recovery in the area of spiritual health, and all those dimensions that we are mentioned, and also fulfilling one responsibility in the family, in the occupational life, and also to the community. So if you look at these dimensions and you begin to look at all the components of recovery, then you have a better understanding of what recovery is all about. it's not just stopping the, the usage of drug or being abstinent. If an individual is abstinent, but it's not physically healthy and it's not really achieving its full potential in all those dimensions, and it's also not fulfilling his role as a family member, it's not fulfilling his role or whatever is expected of him in his own place of work, occupational work, workplace, or he's not even fulfilling his own responsibility in the community where he lives, then we cannot really say that he has achieved a full recovery. Though he might be in recovery, but we have to look at recovery as a composite term and look at all these dimensions. Until we look at all these dimensions, we cannot really say the person is actually in recovery. So when we are treating clients, we should aim at making sure that they achieve their full potential in all these dimensions that I mentioned. Thank you very much. I think Dr. Beatrice will continue from here.
Thank you, Moses. If you stop sharing, then I can begin my sharing. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Thank you, Moses.
Okay.
Good to see you all. So I'm going to continue from where Moses began. And sorry about that. That's not the one. We are still in C2. Today we are doing a couple of modules together. So we're going to do UTC module 1. We've done module 2 now, and we're going to be doing module 3 at the same time. So Moses has started module 2 about recovery and recovery management. And I want to continue from where he has emphasized that recovery is more than just abstinence. I think that's the key thing that we need to take home from this presentation of Moses. Many times as families, we assume that someone has recovered because they have stopped using substances. And I think what this definition that Moses has introduced us to is to understand that recovery is more than just abstaining from using substances. I don't know many of us are family members of people who use substances. And most of the times we find ourselves asking, has he stopped using? So, and we are constantly, sometimes checking out whether they're using, whether it's, I don't know whether it was in this class that someone shared about a client whose family even pretends they are hugging them. And then the reason they're hugging them is to check whether they are drunk, as a way of checking whether they are still recovering. But Moses has led us to think of recovery in a broader way. That abstinence is just one aspect of recovery, but there are many more aspects to think about. So recovery is holistic from that definition. It encompasses very many different things, from not using the substance, from improved health, from improved quality of life, issues of self-direction, issues of reaching full potential, contributing to society. I think these are important things for us to think about. I'm sure you can begin to see that for the client then to achieve those components of recovery, it can't be a journey of the client on their own. So that's like we're going to be looking at. We'll be trying to look at recovery as a process that requires the support of many different players and stakeholders. And so we're going to be looking at recovery management. And I want you to look at the picture you see on that slide. Can you tell me what you see there? Yes, what do you see there? Please put it in your chat what you see there. Yes, on the slide. Let's see what you see. Sometimes we all see different things, So I can see the chat, so I'll be able, yeah, someone says a bumpy road. What else can someone else see? So there is a road in a forest, there is undulating road, a long and winding road, lonely, very long, beautiful color. Yes, all things you see, and that's important. Things that characterize recovery. So recovery is a journey that's going to be long. In fact, Moses said that it's a lifelong journey. It's a long-term journey. And you know that many people, including clients and families, bring us clients and assume that we are going to fix them and give them back to them to finish the work. This curriculum is teaching us that recovery is a long-term process. And so it seeks to do what is called give us a paradigm shift, to stop thinking of recovery the way we thought about it for many years. It was sort of a one-time thing where someone comes in, you treat them, and they go back and they should stay in abstinence and they should be fine. And then the family gets frustrated when they lapse and come back to you again, and sometimes for several episodes. And so what this module and what this curriculum is introducing is so that we start thinking of treatment from what we call an acute care approach to thinking of it as a long-term sort of process, a long-term process that is directed by the client, but also which does require a lot of support from the rest of the stakeholders. So we stop thinking about discrete episodes of treatment and connect episodes of treatment to a long recovery and support. That's what this curriculum is about. Now, before I go to the next slide, I want to ask a question to you, because I do know many of us are managers of some kind. What is management to you? Yes, when you say you're a manager, when we say we are doing management, what does management entail? Yes, kindly type in your chat what management is to you. I am not very lucky now, I can't see my chats, but Kim will see them for me and they read them for me. What does management mean for you? Let's hear. Or what does management entail? Is anyone a manager here?
Here we go. Sure. Here's one. Yes. Management means decisions, taking those concerns of others, organizing resources for specific goals, coordinating the affairs of people, directing others to achieve organization goals, being in charge of others, being in control, coordination.
Very good. Thank you very much for that. And that's the idea I want you to have in mind as we think about recovery. So Moses has told us that recovery is a journey. And now management is about decision making. It's about mobilizing resources. It's about organizing, coordinating those resources. So when we think about recovery management, we think in the same way. And so we are recognizing that recovery for the clients to achieve the many things that Moses talked to us about, which are the aspects of recovery, then we must think of recovery from a broader perspective as stakeholders. We must think of the following elements of recovery management. One is what we call client empowerment. Client empowerment has to do with the focus being on the client. Many times, I don't know whether in your country it's like that, but I see that in my country for many years, where treatment was forced on a client, and the treatment center and the family would determine what the client needs to do to get well. Now, this way of thinking is shifting us from looking at the client as acquiring self-directed ability, and therefore we seek to empower the client. So the client must become a key player in the process of his recovery. Assessment is critical. Remember the other day in the discussion, we emphasize the importance of assessment before we make decisions on what works for the client and what may not work. And that's why we said we can never say one size fits all, because clients' needs are different, and therefore assessment helps us identify the needs and where we need to prioritize. The third element is recovery resource development. Just like we have said in management, a manager develops resources, a manager coordinates resources, a manager allocates resources, a manager monitors how resources are utilized. So recovery too does require that we develop resources that will support recovery. Some of these resources will include what someone put in their expectation. Someone said they would like to know how the family can support the client in recovery. So when you start bringing in the family, you're actually doing what is called recovery resource development. The other one is recovery education and training, which is basically what we are doing right now. We're trying to build our capacity to understand recovery, to be able to support recovery work of clients. The next one is ongoing monitoring and support. It is not enough to put your client in your treatment and discharge them. It is your responsibility to monitor what is going on during that long journey that can be only for the client. Recovery advocacy, very important. Many times our clients don't have the voice because of stigma. Remember, we were talked to about stigma last time and how stigma can cause discrimination. It can cause people to be denied opportunities. We, as the treatment providers, have a responsibility to promote access of services to our clients as part of recovery advocacy. And finally, of course, evidence-based treatment and support services. We know that people may need with clients. Sometimes it's influenced by many ways of thinking and not necessarily supported by any evidence-based. So as part of recovery management, we have a responsibility to find out which are the evidence-based approaches and support services that we can use to build recovery so that we can be able to achieve that holistic recovery we have been told about by Moses. So basically, these next slides are just emphasizing those points. We've said empowerment is about ensuring the client is a full participant. And I want you to remember some of the things you see in your countries and in some of the treatment centers, where clients are forced into treatment, forced into programs, and they have no idea why they are there or what is happening to them. So basically telling us that clients must fully participate in their planning of their recovery, in designing and even evaluating a treatment program as much as is possible. We've talked about the assessment. I think what I want to emphasize, and you can see it's actually highlighted in red in this slide, is that many times we tend to assess clients to know what are their problems. But this curriculum emphasizes the use of what we call a strength-based approach. Strength-based approach is to come despite all the problems the client has, they still have strengths. Maybe the strength they have is the motivation to come for treatment. Maybe the strength they have is their sense of self-efficacy, that they can do it. Maybe the strength they have is the job that is still hold. Maybe the strength they have is they still have family support. All these are examples of strengths that we need to assess as we are doing assessment of our clients. And not just look at the strengths of the individual, but also of the family. Our recovery resource development, we have said, is where we strive to link the various resources that we have in the community so that they are working together. And I think this is one of the links that we have in our society, whether it's for SUD treatment or for mental health treatment. We are fragmented with different people offering different services. The client falls in between the cracks as you refer them from one service provider to the other one. And so what this curriculum challenges us to do is to reflect about our communities, think about the professional resources, the indigenous community resources, maybe it's the religious beliefs, maybe it's the cultural practices and groups. How can we link all this to support the client? Because most has said that recovery is about the client to fully participate and fully contribute to society. It's about the client achieving their full potential. For that to happen, then this very community must accommodate the client. And therefore, we link all these support systems, whether it's the personal, the professional, or the indigenous community resources, we are doing development of resources for recovery. And then, of course, the second point is about guiding the individual and the family to connect with the bigger community. For example, you might find that in your communities or in your countries, you have got communities of people that are in recovery. Sometimes you have communities of family members who meet because they are trying to cope with recovery of their loved ones. And we have got many of them, groups like Al-Anon for families. Others are for Alatin for teenagers. We have different groups that could be available in our communities, or even cultural groups, or even religious groups that can actually support your client or their family. And as you develop or you try to connect them to these recovery resources, what you're doing is actually developing recovery resource. And the idea is that we achieve what is called a recovery-oriented system of care, where we can build all these networks into a sort of a support boat where our client can have a safety net. So they are not just working with you as the therapist, but they have you and they have all these other community resources that have been mobilized and brought on board to support the recovery of that long journey. We have said education and training is about, building knowledge, skills. Yes?
I'm sorry to interrupt, but your audio is cutting in and out, and I think maybe if you turn your camera off, the audio will be stronger.
The audio is not good enough?
No, I mean, it periodically is clear and then it'll be garbled for a minute. So
Okay. So I'll turn off the video, right?
yes, I think that will help.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Let's give it a try. Thank you for that. So we are saying that maybe I just go back to this slide in case you didn't get me well, that recovery, the personal, the professional, and the indigenous resources in the community into what we call a recovery support system. So that your client, as they leave your treatment center or as they continue seeing you for treatment, they are also supported by other community networks into some sort of a safety net. So it's not just your business, it's your business and the business of the different community organs. So when we mobilize this community support, we are doing what is called recovery resource development. Recovery education and training is about skilling, it's about knowledge, it's about change of attitudes. It's about what we are doing now. We are service providers. We are trying to enhance our education and training. We have got sometimes families that we bring on board to build their knowledge and skills base. Sometimes we go to communities for outreach and talk about treatment and recovery. All this is part of recovery education and recovery management. Kim, I hope I'm better now.
Yes.
All right, thank you. Ongoing monitoring and support is about professional checkups where we want to check how our client is doing beyond our contact with them, whether we are in residential treatment or in outpatient. So that professional ongoing monitoring is part of recovery management. And then of course, sometimes we identify peer mentors or coaches for our clients and we connect them to them and they keep an eye on them. That's part of what we are calling ongoing monitoring and support. And it is also an element of recovery advocacy. We have said a lot of times there's a lot of stigma and discrimination against our clients. And so one of our key roles as service providers is to advocate for our clients. Sometimes we have found our clients who are young people and they were supposed to go back to school being denied opportunities to go back to school because they have been using substances. So it's your responsibility, or you have a responsibility to advocate for them. Some of the ways you can advocate for them is writing a letter to explain that this client has been in treatment with you and they have covered so much work or so much recovery work, and you are committing to support them and you feel they should be given a chance to continue with school. Sometimes you do advocacy to the employer because the employer doesn't want their client back to work, and you want the client given a chance because you think they have sufficiently recovered to be able to work. Your responsibility in recovery management. We are calling it recovery advocacy. And so ideally, sometimes we can also take it at a bigger level where we advocate for systems that promote long-term recovery. A good example is when you influence policies in your workplace or policies in government. For example, in our country, we have been pushing and we have pushed in the past to influence the government to accommodate treatment time for clients who have substance use disorder. So now we have achieved quite some gain, and members who work for the government can be given time out up to 3 months to actually attend residential treatment. That's an example of recovery advocacy. It's a way of building recovery support systems for our clients. And that's what some of the things you can think about. Now, the other one is about evidence-based practices. And we are saying that many times we are doing many things, and treatment centers could be doing many different things with clients. We have a responsibility as part of recovery management to ensure that we are replacing the methods that we have been using or that have been used that do not necessarily have a scientific basis with those ones that have got some sense of evidence base. I do know that sometimes we challenge what we are given as evidence based and ask ourselves, is that evidence really relating to my context, my cultural context? I always argue that sometimes it's better to use what has some evidence than what has no evidence. But at the same time, we have a responsibility to pick those practices and test them in our cultural settings and validate them in our cultural context so that we can see whether they work the same way they work in other cultural contexts. I think that is part of our responsibility of building evidence-based treatment and support services for our clients. And part of this helps to remove the barriers to recovery so that we can enhance the client's recovery and what we call recovery capital, which someone else is going to be covering very shortly, and that is Morekwe. So thank you very much. And because I have 3 minutes, I'm going to ask you to give me an example of any one of those elements of recovery management that you have been doing or you have seen in your country. Any example, whether it is recovery resource development, just share any one of them that you have been doing in your cultures. I am checking out your chat. Yes, have you been doing any recovery management work, or you are only managing your treatment center? Yes, any example of recovery management?
Now you're getting some.
Yes, I'm getting some, and someone said my speaker is not working. Is that true?
It cuts in and out. So it's after you turned off the camera, it worked better, but it still cuts out a little bit.
Okay, very well. So someone says they've done recovery advocacy for students to return back to school after timeout. Thank you very much. Someone else says that most of those elements are part of the AMT management. Someone else says they have done advocacy for workers. Thank you very much. These are wonderful examples. Another one says that they've ensured that clients receive services at all stages. The university to stop the policy of suspending students that use substances. That's very important so that they can get treatment and be able to come back to work. Another one is doing assessment in Nigeria. Another one, advocacy for police officers. Another one is integrating treatment models in South Africa and trying to link community resources and peer support. Lovely. Thank you very much for your wonderful input. I think we can continue strengthening the elements of recovery management that we have seen and that we have introduced ourselves to today so that we can get better at treatment. I want you to remember that sometimes when we say that our clients are failing to get better, we need to ask ourselves, who is failing who? Are the clients failing treatment, or is treatment failing clients? Whenever I think about recovery management, I always think it is our treatment that is failing clients, because all we do is focus on our own unique approaches. If I'm a psychiatrist, I prescribe my medication, I leave the client. If I'm a counselor, I hold my counselor home. What recovery support does the client have that we can build into their recovery, into a network of support? I think that's the challenge of this module. Thank you very much. I now hand it over to Morekwe to take us to module 3. Thank you.
Morekwe, you're muted.
Myself. Okay, I was saying good evening, colleagues. Thank you, Beatrice and Moses, for setting up the piece in terms of the introduction to course 2. I hope all of us are still awake, because I know that we started early, and so we want to make sure that we are still all awake. I've just been seeing, I'm going to share my slide here. Share screen. Share screen. I was seeing some comments regarding the issue of how do we say that our clients should make decisions when they come in being psychotic. I want to believe that as we go through the module, we'll be able to address some of those questions that I've been seeing. Now, we will focus on factors that affect treatment outcome. As much as the questions are here, we'll look at things that actually we have to consider when we are thinking about treatment outcomes one of the things that we established from the previous curriculum or course is the fact that addiction is a chronic relapsing disease. And therefore, I just hope that we are all not surprised by the fact that recovery in the same fashion is actually a process, because we are dealing with a chronic relapsing disease, as we've already established. Now, just looking at the title of this module, Factors Affecting Treatment Outcomes, we have to understand that, when looking at an individual or a person, nobody can predict whether they are going to do well in treatment or whether they are not going to do not well, because there are a lot of factors that can influence treatment outcomes. And it's important for counselors or people within the treatment field to understand and to be cognizant of these factors, because it will help in terms of effective treatment planning as well as case management, more especially that it is a long life process for people that are in recovery. So let's look at what the module is about. We are hoping that at the end of the module, all of us would actually be able to at least identify and list 4 main categories of factors that affect treatment. We are also hoping that we should be all in a position to at least list 3 examples of specific factors in each of the categories that we are going to talk about. We are going to define, and not only define, but provide examples of recovery capital. When you do the training in your face-to-face, you will have time to actually develop a case study, and after developing a case study as a group, you'll identify the positive and negative recovery capital that may affect treatment of an individual. I'm just hoping that we would have time for somebody to actually give us a live case study in the setting so that we can do that. So those are the learning objectives of our module. Now, what are the categories of factors that actually affect treatment? Number 1, we have individual characteristics. I was thinking more about what does characteristics mean actually. These are things that help us to identify an individual. These are things that define an individual to some extent. And therefore, you're looking at a complex number of issues when you look at individual characteristics. It could be physical characteristics that impact or that can affect one's treatment outcome. It could be, as other people have already said, and I'm glad that you are actually paying attention, their mental status at the time when they enter treatment and even when they are in treatment. So individual characteristics. So you are right, doctors, when you were asking the question, how can actually we be talking about decision-making when somebody comes in being psychotic? Of course, those things affect their cognitive ability to actually consent to come into treatment. You could actually think about their cognitive development in terms of how those things actually impact their treatment outcome. So there are a lot of factors that comprise of individual characteristics that we are going to look at in terms of how they impact treatment. The nature and the severity of the problems actually also influence treatment outcomes. I think, like when looking at the slide here, because it says problems, it's just not one problem. So if somebody comes with a variety or a number of problems, surely it is going to impact either the duration of the treatment outcome. It could also impact on what kind of menu of services are you going to provide that kind of an individual. And the severity of the problem also impacts on the treatment outcome. Remember from from curriculum 1, when we are talking about the definition of substance use disorder and how it's defined, we said one of the markers is actually severity. So the severity of the substance use disorder that one is coming with actually also influences the treatment outcome. So if you have a client that has less severe SUD as compared to somebody with very severe. It determines the treatment outcome. It determines the type of treatment, whether it's inpatient, outpatient, and all that. So the nature and severity. And then if you have a lot of problems, if somebody has SUD, if they have comorbid disorders, definitely is going to affect the treatment outcome. Not only are we talking about health problems, it could be social problems, it could be interpersonal problems, it could be financial problems. So the category actually comprises a lot of problems looking at the different domains of an individual. The third category is treatment process as well as the service that is provided. Now, coming to treatment process, the treatment process differs from one treatment facility to the other. The type of processes that our facilities have actually has a bearing in terms of the treatment outcome of our patients or our clients. It could be admission process. Some treatment centers would have to go from one office to the other being asked the same question, whether screening, assessment. So if you don't have coordinated treatment processes or protocols, definitely that is going to impact on one's eagerness to actually engage, right? It could be the number of days or months that somebody has to wait in terms of being admitted in a treatment facility. I know that here in Botswana, we do have an issue in terms of our treatment facilities. We actually don't even have an inpatient rehab. So you can imagine if we have somebody at our clinic, because I do run a clinic, and it's supposed to actually go or is deemed to be needing an inpatient facility, we would have to call and see whether they can actually be taken to South Africa for an inpatient. So just that process affects the treatment outcome of an individual. The type of services that are provided, whether it's integrated services, we have treatment facilities where they offer maybe counseling, but they don't offer detox. Others with detox and not giving other services that an individual might be needing. So, and not only the processes and services, the people providing the services actually somehow impact on the treatment outcome of our patients. It's about the attitude of treatment providers, the knowledge, the skills of the treatment providers. So you can see that when we look at is this individual going to make it or not, we're not just focusing on the individual. There are a lot of other factors that we need to put into consideration. The third one, or the fourth one, by the way, it's environmental and social conditions. We need to be cognizant of the environment. Do they have a shelter? Do they come from a homestead that actually encourages and supports recovery? The social conditions that one is in also impact the recovery. And these conditions, we also have to look at them when somebody is coming into treatment and throughout the continuum of care. What kind of conditions a person is in determines the outcome of the treatment. The interaction among these factors also contributes obviously to the treatment outcome or the treatment success rate of our clients. I want us to take a minute. I know I've said a bit about these categories, just to think about in what ways does individual characteristic impact our treatment outcome. And I'm gonna kindly ask him to read the responses. The first one that we are going to look at is how do individual characteristics, right, impact or affect treatment outcomes? And in answering that, just so that we are clear, state the individual characteristic and how probably that would impact on or affect the treatment outcome. So I'm going to give you a minute. Individual characteristics, how do those impact treatment? Do we have a response?
Not yet. It's taking a minute. Impulsivity. So someone wrote impulsivity.
Mhm. So how does that impact treatment outcome? I do agree it does, but I would want to know, how does it impact treatment outcome?
Well, the next answer actually is a part answer to that, even though it's a different person.
Yeah.
Now they're coming really fast. It would impact adherence.
Yes, thank you.
Another one is comorbidities could affect motivation. Age could affect motivation. Let's see. The individual characteristics include personality. Oops, I lost it. Sorry. Personality disposition that can affect the capacity. It's freezing on me. To receive or comply with treatment regimen.
So the same. So thank you. We will be reading those, of course, and then I'm going to skip to the other category. I'm going to skip the nature and severity and go to how does maybe treatment process and service provided impact on treatment, and then we can go to the next slide. How does treatment process and service provided impact or affect treatment outcome?
Cumbersome protocols can affect treatment outcome. I'm assuming that means negatively.
Yes.
If the treatment
as Beatrice was, okay. Go ahead.
You want me to keep going? The provider competencies can affect treatment outcomes.
Yes. No, thank you for sharing. I'm hoping others are also reading. And I think one of the ones that has been noted is evidence-based treatment. So actually one of those that impacts on treatment outcomes. There's a group exercise that we are supposed to do when we're doing face-to-face. I'm just going to skip this exercise. When we do have time, I'm just going to come back because I tried to come up with a creative way for us to do it, but we can still do it when we have time. So I'm just going to skip if it's okay with everybody. Now, we've already talked about recovery and the fact that it's a process, but obviously for one to recover, they need resources for them to recover, right? Now let's look at what makes it possible for people to be in recovery. Cloud and Granfield have coined recovery capital as the sum of personal and social resources at one's disposal for addressing drug dependency and chiefly bolstering one's capacity and opportunities for recovery. Simply put, it is the depth and the breadth of internal and external resources that one has at their disposal. That helps in initiating recovery and or sustaining recovery from using psychoactive substances. So in order for one to actually recover, they need to have resources. I've highlighted at one's disposal because at times we do have resources that are there in the community, but it doesn't necessarily it doesn't necessarily translate to the fact that our clients actually would have access to those resources. So we have to pay attention when we normally say there are resources in the community. The clients have access to the resources. If it's about a treatment center, can somebody drive over there? Is there transportation to access those services? Do they have the financial means to actually access the services themselves? And one of the things that we have to understand in terms of recovery capital, as already highlighted, it's strength-based tool that identifies and builds upon a client's personal and social assets. So we look at what a person already has and focus on the positives as compared to the negative. And we do that by identifying. And if it's not at a level that would help somebody in recovery, we build upon that by probably one way of doing that is to build skills, right? If there are other resources that could actually be developed, it's a way of increasing one's recovery capital. So recovery capital is not only the resource that one has already, but it also involves us, our counselors, to ensure that we build upon the ones that are already existing. Sometimes our clients actually lose these resources through addiction. So it is our responsibility to identify the ones that have been lost through the process of addiction and build upon those. And to actually create an opportunity for other avenues to actually bring in new resources that one would need for the recovery journey. Now, there are 8 domains that have been identified by UNODC, right? We are still talking about recovery capital. It's what does one need for them to actually initiate recovery, sustain recovery. UNODC has identified 8 domains. I know that it's adapted from International Network of Drug Dependence Treatment and Rehabilitation Resource Center. The first domain is family and social support. So what is it about the family and the social support that can actually assist this individual recover? We then have to ask ourselves, are the family members supportive of the recovery? Are they engaged in the recovery? One way to determine whether family and social support is actually supportive. Do they come for family sessions? That's another way. Are they interested in terms of what the person actually needs as compared to their own needs? Do they have interest in understanding what the person is going through? So we look at that it's a component that is actually helpful for individuals to continue in their recovery. The other domain is the safe housing and healthy environment. We look at the safe housing. Do they have a house over the head? We do have clients that have co-occurring problems, that have SUD and they're homeless. So you can see that when somebody is homeless, right, they're not only thinking about recovery, they're also thinking about just basic needs. So it's important for us when we identify these things that we should be able to map what are some of the resources that the individual is going to need that would assist them in their recovery. The third domain is not in order, I'm just saying that because I'm reading, it's peer support. Peer support, do they have support systems that actually help in their recovery? Are they employed? Do they have legal issues that are pending? It's another domain. Do they have skills that actually can assist them in their recovery? We look at community integration. Community plays a bigger role actually, and a very important role in terms of recovery. The other time we talked about how community actually can be a resource. If we have a community that's stigmatized, people are less likely to engage in treatment. Do they have meaning and purpose in life? That is another domain. Mental and physical health is another domain that actually contributes to one's recovery capital. Now, while these other domains that I've just talked about help to strengthen a person's recovery, obviously, a lack of these assets can actually hamper the recovery process of the desired outcomes. So it is important for us to look at what is it, because when you are doing treatment plan and you actually map out the recovery capital, then you would be effective in terms of treatment planning and case management. There are 3 recovery capitals that have been deemed to be very crucial by White and Cloud, more especially for addiction professionals. There are 3, right? We've obviously identified that there are 8, but for White and Cloud, they have underscored these 3 types. That is the personal recovery, family and social recovery capital, community and cultural recovery capital. Now, when we look at personal recovery capital, it's actually dissected into two. The first one being physical recovery. So when we look at physical recovery capital, these are assets that actually help us to attain our basic needs. So we look at physical health, whether is the person healthy. When our clients come, or when somebody with SUD comes and they are physically healthy, and the only issue that they have is SUD, they are more likely to actually probably have their recovery different as compared to somebody who also has comorbid issues in terms of physical health. Financial assets, safe and recovery conducive shelter is one, clothing, food, access to transportation. These assets actually make it more possible for an individual to actually address the basic needs. So when somebody has the basic needs addressed, it is probably less challenging for them to focus on the recovery as compared to somebody with a variety of problems, and more especially when it comes to basic human needs. Now, still on the personal recovery, we have the human capital. For this category, it looks at the client's values. What are the client's values? For a client who values integrity, you can only imagine if you ask somebody, what are your values? And they say honesty. How would that impact the treatment? How is it a recovery capital? How is it that an asset in terms of you helping the person in recovery? It is helpful because, one, in treatment, they are going to be truthful about what it is that they're going through. If they've had a lapse, if they have had a relapse, right? The knowledge that they have are very important. If you have a client that is already knowledgeable about the disorder, it does help in terms of educating them. Educational and vocational skills and credentials is another asset in terms of human capital. Problem-solving capacities is it's an asset for one to have. I'll give an example. I had a client who was a young man. This young man was a drug lord. I always remember him, and I always give this example in terms of problem-solving capacity. Unfortunately for him, unlike the other drug lords, he started using drugs with his girlfriend, and he came obviously because of his use, not because he was a drug lord. But as we were actually in the counseling session, one of the things that was very interesting about this young man was his ability to have sustained his business, right? For quite some time. And for me, it showed that he has problem-solving capacities because he was able to traffic drugs from one area to the other. And we actually talked about how can we now use these problem-solving capacities in terms of your recovery, right? The other asset is self-awareness, being aware of your strengths and opportunities for growth. It's an opportunity. For somebody with insight in terms of what the challenges are, it does help them in terms of this journey of recovery. And then self-esteem, self-efficacy is one of the assets that is under human capital. Continuing with human capital, hopefulness, optimism, perception of one's past, present, and future, the sense of meaning and purpose in life, and interpersonal skills. The second category that they deem to be important for addiction professionals is family and social recovery, intimate relationships, looking at the type of relationship that one has. Do they provide and foster recovery? Family and kinship relationship, obviously very important in terms of ensuring that there's recovery. Last week when we talked about the fact that addiction is a family disease, we also mentioned, I know it was Beatrice, who taught us in terms of the different roles that family members have. It's important for us then to understand who is the capital or who actually facilitates recovery when you look at family relationships, right? Now, we have two concepts here, or maybe two words, I wouldn't say concepts, family and kinship. Our clients sometimes say, I have a family member. A family does not necessarily mean blood. Our clients sometimes, when they say family, it's somebody that they consider family, that they consider to be close and consider to play a role in terms of their life. So sometimes as counselors, we have to be more aware that when people tell us about family, or when we try to map out the recovery capital in terms of family and social recovery, we are more attuned to the fact that other people outside family circles can actually be part of that capital or assets. And then kinship is straightforward, it's blood relationships. So when you look at family and social recovery capital, family can actually act as assets. And in some instances, they are actually people that deter or maybe impact negatively in terms of recovery capital. We also look at any social relationships that are supportive of recovery efforts. That could be friends, that could be sponsors. I know other people have sponsors. Some of our clients have sponsors. So all relationships that are supportive of one's recovery are important in terms of us identifying what are some of the things that actually this person has or has lost during addiction that we can resuscitate for them to recover. Okay. Important to note is that family and social recovery is indicated by the willingness of the intimate partners and family members to participate in treatment. I've already highlighted that. We have to make sure that when we say that they have a family, is this family a capital for that individual, right? And for us to know that they have to be willing to participate and be interested in one's treatment. The presence of others in recovery within the family or social context is the same. The most important thing to get out of this slide is the fact that they are actually participating. It's not just the fact that they are family members. Access to recovery-based or at least abstinent fellowships and leisure activity. You look at the social aspect of it. When we assess one's recovery capital, looking at the social aspect, we look at activities or maybe fellowships and groups that actually support recovery. So in terms of institutions, we would want to know whether they go to an institution that actually has a counseling center, for example. The workplace that does not shun people that or stigmatize people that are in recovery, a place of worship that does not stigmatize, a community that does not stigmatize. And then the last recovery capital is the community and cultural recovery capital. Community recovery capital speaks more to community attitudes, policies, resources related to addiction that promote recovery. So Beatrice was talking about what are the policies, how do you advocate? This is about community. So community actually is very important when you think about recovery, because our clients, our patients, when they come out of our offices, our treatment centers, they go back to the community. It also includes strategies by the community itself to reduce stigma, right? We talked about what we can do in terms of our communities as professionals and belonging to communities. Have visible, diverse local recovery models in our communities that actually can assist in the recovery of our clients. A full continuum of addiction treatment resources in our communities. We have to advocate for that. Recovery, mutual aid and support resources that are accessible and diverse, obviously because we are very diverse, and some of these support, peer support groups might not necessarily meet one's needs and meet the other person's need. An example of that is the 12-step program in terms of whether we have these resources in our communities. We also look at local recovery community support institutions in a lot of times we have communities where people come from treatment centers brought back into the communities, but there is nothing that supports the recovery within the community. And it's very important for us, especially in Africa, to be thinking more about how do we build and support our community resource to help with the recovery. Resources of sustained recovery support and early re-intervention. The last one, still, which is part of the community and cultural, is a form of community capital, local availability of indigenous cultural pathways of recovery, like incorporating tribal values and practices into recovery programs. Important for us is that when we develop recovery programs, we should also be thinking about what are some of, is it culturally relevant? How do we actually incorporate our cultural practices and values into our treatment and recovery programs so that it's supported by the community? Recovery capital, this is the last slide. Recovery capital, both its quantity and quality, play a major role in determining the success and failure of treatment and recovery. I hope that answers Fatima's question, because I know last week you were asking about treatment outcomes and what are the predictive factors in terms of treatment. It's the recovery capital, both quantity, most importantly, and quality. So think about the 8 domains that we've just discussed about. And the last thing that I want to also highlight is the fact that it's not just only recovery capital, also the treatment providers actually play a significant role in terms of identifying these assets and in terms of the services that we do provide. So you can think about what recovery is because we've defined it, what are some of the factors and that affect treatment outcomes, and clearly the definition of recovery capital. Some of the exercises here, we will not be able to do it, but I'm hoping that when you do your teaching face-to-face, you will have an opportunity, obviously, because there will be more time, to develop a case study, and other people can identify what we've just discussed today that might affect treatment outcomes. What are some of the things that a client has that we can build on in terms of the recovery? So right, clearly when you do that, and that is the end of our presentation for today. So I am done. I was looking at the time.
Yes, we're actually a little bit over. Sorry, everybody. You know, we just whizzed through what, if you were doing the training, would be, I think, a day and a half's worth of material in an hour and a half. So very quickly.
Yes.
Remember that we are meeting again tomorrow at the same time. So as soon as we get off the phone, I will send you out the link for tomorrow. I won't have the link for the video that fast. I'm not sure I'll keep the video. I'm not sure if I can keep up the videos that fast for every day, but I'm going to try. But it won't be, I'll probably send that out in another email tomorrow. What's tomorrow morning for me, tomorrow afternoon for you. So we will see you all again tomorrow, and I don't think there's anything else to say today. Just thank you. Thanks for coming.